Today's webinar, this is my first one, it's very exciting, and we will be talking about habits, so Keystone habits in particular, and I will be also talking about mindfulness meditation, which is, I guess, my Keystone habit, and we'll get to Keystone habits in a bit. Now, hi everyone. So yes, habits. Habits can be good ones or bad ones, and we talk a lot about drinking habits in Club Soda. So that can mean many things. It can be just where you drink, what you drink, all that kind of stuff. And then drinking can actually become a real habit. So it becomes a habitual thing where you, let's say after work, when you've got the kids in bed, whenever you usually have a drink. And that kind of thing can be a really difficult one to break if it becomes a sort of daily habit. And they can obviously be about people, places, things, all kinds of things. And I'm sure we've all got our own examples of those. And the thing about habits is that they become sort of like an autopilot thing. You do something without even thinking about it. You do one thing and then you turn to do the next thing and the next thing. And obviously changing habits can be really hard, as I'm sure we all know. Both setting up good new habits, so like starting going to the gym, or getting rid of bad habits like smoking or drinking too much or whatever they might be. And there's a lot of science stuff about habits that gets repeated, like it takes 21 days to change a habit. That one comes out a lot, but actually it's a bit more complicated than that. So I think the 21 days came from one single study where people had to change habits and all kinds of different little things, and the average they found was 21 days it took for people to change their habits. So actually it may take a lot longer, it might be a lot quicker, but you never really know until you've tried. So people will always be different and everyone's got their own times. And I think the sort of consensus among the scientists is that probably 2 months is a sort of a realistic time to think about changing your habits. That's how long it takes. So you have to start doing it, and then you have to keep practicing, and then after a while it becomes a sort of a thing you do without even thinking about it too much. Now, because changing habits is so difficult, then obviously we want to have something that helps with that. And luckily there are things that will help with that. And Club Soda is full of those ideas, different tips and tricks. And one thing I'm going to talk about today, which is the title of today's webinar, is Keystone habits. And it's a funny little word, but it basically just means that they are habits that help you support other habits. So either you can create new ones or sustain existing ones. So it's something you do that helps you do other things. And obviously a good keystone habit is something that is good on their own right, but the extra benefit comes from the fact that then that one thing helps with other good habits as well. Like, for example, flossing your teeth, really a good thing, but doesn't really help with anything else in your life much. Or maybe it does, but I can't think of anything. So we need something that is a bit more special than that. So if you think about it, there's sort of what could be good keystone habits. Exercise is obviously one that gets mentioned first. So obviously good in its own right, you feel good, better mood, positive, get fit, all kinds of good things come from that. But it probably then also helps you with other changes in your life if you're generally feeling better about your life and everything. Yeah, get up, do sit-ups after and then meditate. Yeah, that could work. And mindfulness meditation, obviously also a popular one these days. So we'll talk about that in a bit. And exercise and mindfulness, so they're probably the two best ones, but there are loads of other ones, like getting into a habit of setting goals and keeping track of your progress. That's a good habit to have. And that's actually something we usually talk about quite a lot in Club Soda. Setting goals in different ways, either online or keeping a diary or whatever that might be. Writing a daily gratitude journal, that could be a good one. Anything that gets you thinking about what you're doing and reflecting on things. Flossing mindfully, yeah, I think that could come on to be a big thing one day, maybe. But I think what the key thing is about the Keystone habits is that you have to find your own. Because you might be really into exercise or not want to do any at all, or really love mindfulness or not at all, so you'll have to figure out what's good for you and what might help you best. And another good thing about Keystone habits is that they can also be replacing old habits. So let's say, for example, if you, whenever you come back from work, you drink a glass of wine. So if you can replace that with something else, like going for a walk, then you've got the double benefit of you're not having the glass of wine and you're doing exercise instead. So that's a really good thing. So all you need to do is find your Keystone habits and then practice, practice, practice. And as I said, mindfulness is sort of my Keystone habit. It sort of happened by accident. I wasn't thinking about it in those terms, but looking back, that's exactly what it did. Now, it's obviously hard to get started with mindfulness, as I'm sure loads of people in the community have discovered. Although there's been a lot of discussion recently. People have been downloading apps, getting started, which is interesting to see. But yeah, and it wasn't easy for me as well. I'll maybe talk a little bit about that shortly. But once I did get started, it really helped in all kinds of other ways, like improve my concentration, focus, etc. And then also, after I'd been doing meditation for a bit, I pretty much lost interest in drinking at all, which was an interesting thing because I wasn't really planning for it to have that impact, but it did. And as a little side step there, it is also one of the Buddhist precepts. I mean, it gets translated in different ways, but basically one of the, I think is it 12 guidelines for a good life in Buddhist teaching is that one of them is you should not get drunk, or sometimes interpreted as you shouldn't drink at all, but people have different interpretations of that. So yeah, we'll get to the mindfulness in a bit, but I'll maybe just mention one other thing about habits, which is habit chaining. It's sort of a bit like Keystones, but slightly different. So the idea is that you create one good habit, which leads to another, and then possibly another. So a sort of silly example of this I've heard is that if you wanted to drink more water on a daily basis, because it's probably good for you, keeps you hydrated and all that, but you're finding it hard to drink water. So if you can chain that into something else, so for example, every morning when you put the milk back into the fridge, you remind yourself, I meant to have a glass of water, and then you have a glass of water, and then that becomes your habit chain of where you have your breakfast, you put milk back in the fridge, and you have a glass of water, and hey presto, you've created a good habit of drinking a glass of wine in the morning. And some people are really excited about this idea, and they create really long chains of habits. So you can have 10 different things you do in the morning, and you sort of build them one by one. So you you floss your teeth mindfully, obviously, and then you drink a glass of water and do this and that, and before you notice it, you've done 10 things you want to do every morning without even thinking about it. Now, I'm not actually tried this idea, but it sounds sort of plausible that you might be able to set these things up. But there are people out there, and you can find blogs and things of people explaining all kinds of crazy things they've done by chaining habits together. And there's, like most of these things, we talk quite a bit more about habits and how to change them on our mindful drinking course, which some of you have been on. Now there's a question, how important and how to go about recording progress. When I did try to develop a daily flossing habit, I used the wall chart to cross off days, trying not to break the chain. Yeah, recording progress. I think it's sort of, for some people it's a really good thing, and others are not so fast. Like personally, I don't really make notes or keep track of things other than in my mind. But obviously, writing things down is a really good thing and can be really helpful. So again, experiment, I guess. See what happens. But I think, yeah, the main thing is just to do it and practice and see what happens. Be mindful. So let's then talk a bit more about mindfulness meditation. Now, the first thing is that mindfulness meditation is sort of a huge subject. There's tons of there. We could talk for days and days. Even just the name of the things, mindfulness meditation, are they the same thing? Are they a different thing? So for today, let's say that they are the same thing. I mean, there are some differences, and there's hundreds of different types of meditation and mindfulness and all that. But let's not get into that. So let's just talk about mindfulness, and mean both things, mindfulness and meditation, and a few other things. And then, if you've ever come across the concept, you will have maybe had all kinds of crazy ideas about what it is and what it means and all that. And I have to say, I had all kinds of crazy ideas when I first started thinking about meditation. You have this image maybe of, it's all about clearing your mind and getting enlightened and all kinds of strange things happening. And yeah, all kinds of strange things can happen. It's true, and sometimes do happen. But really, I think for me, what it really means is that it's all about accepting each moment just as it is, and not trying to wish you were somewhere else or hope for something different. So I used to read sort of Zen books and writings, and it would just not make any sense, because they'd say one thing and then they'd say the exact opposite thing in the next sentence, and it just doesn't make any sense. But over time, these things do start to make sense, which is interesting to see. And there are some fantastic stories, especially Zen Buddhists love these stories, sometimes called koans. And one of my favorites is one where a monk goes to his master and asks some question about meditation and this and that, and the master gives a really simple answer, saying, well, this is how simple it is. And the monk says, oh, but that's silly. I mean, any 8-year-old child could say that. And the master says, yes, any 8-year-old child could say that, but I'm an 80-year-old man and I can't do it. So a lot of these things, they're really easy to talk about and say out loud, but actually doing them in practice can be really, really difficult. Not trying to put anyone off mindfulness meditation, just be realistic. It probably won't change your life overnight, but if you persist with it, it can be really useful for all kinds of things. So as I said, there's hundreds of different types of mindfulness meditation you can do, and mostly it's thought that it comes from sort of Buddhist Hindu teaching in India, originally 2,500 years ago. So it's been around for a long, long time, and it's had time to develop all kinds of different schools and methods and ways of doing things. And there's a lot of writings as well, which you can find if you're that way inclined. And so mindfulness is a sort of a modern Western, a bit more scientific, in quotation marks, take on meditation. Because for some people, meditation is quite closely tied with Buddhism, and it has a sort of spiritual aspect to it. And I think the mindfulness movement that we see these days is a sort of it is an attempt to take away all of the mystical Buddhist things away from meditation and have something that is just it's pretty much a psychology of the mind, and ways of doing things and trying to live your life. And it is very popular these days, which is interesting to see that it sort of seems to come and go. Like probably in the 60s, there was a big boom in meditation in the West, and it sort of, I guess, went away a little bit, and now it's coming back again in a different guise. So probably we'll see more of that. over the years. Now, if you are then interested in starting something like mindfulness or meditation, how do you get started? Now, that is a good question. My personal story is that I guess I started doing yoga, and that sort of has a little bit of meditation in it, especially the type I did. And I got interested in that kind of thing, and then tried to see if I could do a bit more. And I tried a few different groups. Didn't really like any of them, if I'm really honest. There was always something a bit off-putting about them. I'm sure they work for some people, but didn't work for me. Until I then, a few years ago, I found a group that really clicked with me, and it seems to sort of be what I'm looking for, which is nice. So I think if you can find a really good local group that you can go to, I think that's probably the best way of doing it, because if you have a good that really helps, and keeps things safe and easy in many ways. Again, I guess you'll probably have to try a few. If you are lucky enough to live somewhere like London, where there's hundreds of different groups, maybe try a few, see what you think, ask around, see if any of your friends know anything, look around, try to find one that works for you. Now, if you can't find any local groups or can't find one that you really like, then you can obviously do things on your own as well. And with the wonders of modern technology, there's great apps out there, which I haven't really tried them myself, but Headspace is one that people really love, and the Insight Timer is another one. Seems to be really popular with the club soda crowd at the moment. So I think probably the same rules apply again. You'll just have to try one or two, see what you think. I mean, depending on your personal taste. And because the guided meditations, often the person leading it can really make or break it for you. A friend of mine said that they found a really great app. It had some really great guided meditations, but they couldn't keep on using it because the guy doing the meditations was German, and he had a really strong accent, and he probably didn't mean it, but it sounded like he was giving orders in a really strict German voice, and that's it. It just didn't work for them. So that's a shame. And similar to apps, there's also loads of recordings out there online. So you can find podcasts that do guided meditations, and loads of Buddhist groups record their guided meditations and put them up online. You can listen to. I might find a couple of links to put into the comments afterwards. Yeah, I think we've got a couple of Headspace fans here. Also, people started with yoga. I think that's quite a common way into it. Where was I? Oh, there was I. So yeah, and I also, there's a couple of books on our Club Soda bookshop about mindfulness, which you might want to check out, see if they work for you. And as I've already said, it can be really hard to get started and to keep going. Like for me, as I said, I started doing yoga, and then I started looking into the meditation as well. And I tried a few groups, and I went every week, and I tried to do something every evening, and it just never really caught on. But I kept coming back to it. Sometimes I went a few months without doing anything, and then I remembered, yeah, that meditation stuff, I should really get back into it. And I started again, did a week, maybe 5 minutes every night, and then stopped again. Did a few months without, and then said, oh yeah, that meditation, better get on it again. And I think, as I said, what really helped me was finding that group that I really felt that was right for me. And even then, it was still really difficult to get the daily practice going. I mean, when I first heard this, I sort of thought, yeah, it sort of makes sense, but I think it really does make sense, is that it's much better to do something every day, even if it's just 2 minutes, rather than doing half an hour once a week. because there's something about the daily practice that really makes a difference. So finding maybe the right time for you, it could be first thing in the morning or just before bed or on your lunch break or whenever's a good time. You can take a few minutes of your daily routines and just do, even if it's just 2 minutes a day, that's a really good start, and then you can build it up as you get over that first hump. And it may take a while to see any benefits. I mean, again, everyone's different, so you might see something straight away, or it might take a while for you to see any changes. I guess my early days story is about Stratford Tube Station. Now, for those of you who've never had the pleasure of walking through Stratford Tube Station on rush hour, it's not nice. There's so many people. It's a tiny station, but there's just too many people trying to get through it, and it's really aggressive and horrible. And I used to come home from work every day, and I was dreading the station pretty much the moment I stepped onto the tube, thinking, not this thing again. And I was really angry when I came out of the station, because there's people shoving you and there's people pushing through, going the wrong way and everything. And one day coming home from work, I was reading some Buddhist book, I can't remember which one again, but it just said, when you're faced with a stressful situation, just smile internally and don't worry about it, and it'll be fine. And I thought, yeah, this sounds a bit too simplistic, but I'll give it a go today. And I got out the tube, and there was a humongous rush again, as usual. And I just thought, okay, keep smiling internally. And I kept walking through the station, smiling internally. And I came out the station, and I realized that I was actually smiling externally as well, which is quite an interesting thing. So I tell this story sometimes and say, some of these things, they sound really stupid, but they do sometimes work. It's all about how you react to things. So, and if you want to practice, Stratford Tube Station is a really good place to practice managing your anger and stress. Highly recommend it. And another story I often tell is about how I actually started my daily practice. So what happened was that Brad Warner, who's an American Zen priest, he trained in Japan, and he writes in a very interesting way for a Buddhist priest. He's also a punk rocker, plays bass in a punk band, and he's got a slightly unique take on these things. And I accidentally came across him somewhere. I saw his book and I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. This is punk and Zen, because I was interested in both things, and read the book and I thought, oh, this is quite good, interesting stuff. And then a few months later he came to London. He gave a speech in one of the Buddhist centers here, and I thought, I must go and see this. And I was trying very hard not to have too many expectations about the evening, because I thought, well, it's not going to be anything amazing, is it? And it wasn't. I mean, he actually, his talk was, he was mainly reading from his latest book. So he read a chapter, and then he talked a bit about how he wrote it and all that. And it was sort of interesting, but nothing amazing. And then afterwards there was some Q&A. And I can't exactly remember what the question was, but it was something about how difficult meditation is, and is there anything you can do to make it easier? And Brad sort of leaned back on his seat and said, well, I've been doing this for whatever it was, 25 years, and most mornings when I get up and I sit down to meditate, I think this is the most stupid thing in the world, and why do I do this? But I still do it every day. And I thought, all right, okay, so it doesn't get any easier after 25 years, so really there's not much hope in this except to just do it. And from that day on, which was 3 or 4 years ago, I have actually meditated every day, in the morning and in the evening, without fail. So there we are. Sometimes the best teachings are unexpected. So I think that's sort of my story pretty much. I guess one thing to add is to talk about the drinking and mindfulness. So, I mean, we talked about the Keystone, so you create a good habit, and that helps you create good habits. And I think mindfulness has a sort of also a direct benefit in drinking. So, because I think for many of us, what drives us to drink is the discomfort or some strong emotion like anger, stress, whatever it might be, loneliness. And mindfulness is really good at sort of noticing what's going on in your life and what's going on within yourself. And it might give you just enough time to say, okay, I'm feeling really angry or stressed or whatever at the moment. And it stops the autopilot of, oh, I'll just crack open a bottle of beer and drink that. And instead you could go, okay, let's stay mindful. What's going on? What do I need to do? Should I take a drink or should I do something else? And that sort of saves you from the, well, saves a bit of a strong word, but gives you enough to think about logically what's the best way to do now. Am I just going to revert to my old habits, or am I going to do something new, do something else? So I think that is possibly the best benefit of mindfulness for drinking. So that's the end of my notes. I think did we have any questions? I don't think there were any questions in advance, but if you've got anything, do let me know. You can type in comments. And for those of you on the recording, hang on, let's see where we get to. Joe says, I get irritated if I can't meditate now. I've only been doing it daily for just over a month. It's a new mindful habit. That's really good. And you, just started and kept going. Good stuff. Belinda says, I like how regular practice starts to spill into daily life. Other things like washing up or walking become a more mindful experience. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So it's, well, what I've found is that the actual meditation, it is still really boring and dull most of the time, and I've not had any revelations or enlightenments. But life outside of the meditation slowly changes, and it's really hard to describe how it changes and what it means, but it slowly does, and you sort of, your whole mind shifts in sort of tiny ways, which you might only realize after a while and think, oh, I'm reacting to things in a different way, and life is just a bit different from what it was a year ago. The punk rock Buddhist priest is Brad Warner, that's correct. And the question, did I moderate before I started meditation? Yes, I have actually written a blog post about my moderation journey. So I started cutting down a good few years ago with varying levels of success. And I think what the meditation did is that it was like the final straw that I'd been sort of fairly successfully moderating already. And then one day I had a glass of wine, and I thought, oh, that was all right. I might have another one, thinking, oh, this might lead to a few more. And somewhere halfway through the second glass of wine, I just thought, actually, I don't think I enjoy the feeling anymore like I used to, which was another interesting observation. And I just completely gone off the feeling of being tipsy, which then obviously made it very easy to say no to the second glass, because then what's the point anymore? So that's my experience, and yours will probably be different, but it might be similar in some ways. Just trying to scroll through if there was any other questions that I've missed. Lots of groups on Meetup. Yeah, Meetup's a really good place of finding things. And if you search for Buddhist groups, that might come up with all kinds of things. So again, check one out, see how it works. All the good ones will do like introduction, so they'll explain what they do and how they do it, because some Buddhist groups have a lot of, well, a lot, but some have more than others, rituals and sort of etiquette about how you do, how you behave, and you walk a certain way around the room, or you do this, or you bow that way and this way. And usually nothing too complicated, but just sort of polite, good manners when you go into those groups. But if there's no other questions, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks everyone for listening, and I think Laura will be back next week, and until then, cheers.